About a month ago, we got reports from Disney that they've made $12 billion on the Star Wars franchise, and media outlets were saying, well, since they spent $4 billion to acquire the rights to Lucasfilm, then that means they made a profit off of it, right? It's like, well, no, because all the Star Wars shows, movies, the theme park, and all that other stuff, that costs money to produce as well. And many people were saying, like, well, if you add all that together, that doesn't mean they've actually made money. In fact, many were saying that they've probably actually lost money on it. But Disney wasn't going to admit that, because when they put this report out, this was for their earnings call that was coming up at the time. And during then, Bob Iger was facing stiff challenges for his board seats. So he was trying to paint Disney in the best way possible and trying to make all the purchases that he oversaw as being wise investments in order to try to appeal to the investors. And now that that's all said and done, he was successful ultimately, but now everything that's coming out from Disney is completely on Bob Iger. So if it fails because of Bob Iger now, because there's no more excuses that he has to contend with. And now we're seeing this other reports coming out from tax filings in the UK where it's suggesting that Disney has actually lost money when it comes to Star Wars. So you add up that $4 billion initial investment and then the investment that it costs to make all the movies, the hotel, theme park expansions, and other things like that, they're still in the red when it comes to Star Wars. $4 billion is nothing to sneeze at on paper. George Lucas' sale of the Star Wars intellectual property in its entirety to Disney could have been mistaken for a desperate act. In retrospect, he would probably just fed up with trying to make fans happy. Swooping in, Disney assumed they got it on the cheap back in 2012. We don't have nearly the time to cover every wild twist and turn that has afflicted the Star Wars franchise or Disney since, but Lucas's actions look savvier by the year. And that's because people thought George Lucas was essentially done with Star Wars at the time. There was some shows going on, but people were figuring like there's going to be no more mainline Star Wars movies. But once Disney acquired the rights and announced the new trilogy starring Han, Luke, and Leia, well, then suddenly there was a lot more excitement for it. And that's why Episode 7 was probably the biggest thing for Disney Star Wars. But unfortunately, the first thing that they put out was also the peak, and everything else since then has been downhill. With the calculations in, the debate is over. Star Wars may not be dead, but the hype sure is. To anyone who waited with bated breath to buy tickets to The Phantom Menace a quarter century ago, the current trajectory of Star Wars is as bewildering as it is sad. And it kind of goes on to mention how The Force Awakens was the high point for Disney Star Wars, and everything since has been downhill. But look at this. Concealed in the heap of paperwork, Disney accountants are playing a game of hide and seek when it comes to Lucasfilm, according to a recent Forbes article. In their deep dive into their financial statements concerning the Star Wars media empire, they found Star Wars has not justified its $4 billion price tag. Not yet. More disconcerting, Disney has taken steps to disguise the losses they've incurred. And this isn't unique to just Star Wars. Disney does this all the time with pretty much all their movies. It was obvious back in 2023 when everything that they're releasing in theaters was flopping for them. But when it comes to streaming, they were saying it's profitable. And one of the issues that they were saying was that they were selling the licensing rights for streaming, and that's how they're making a lot of money. But it's not like they're licensing the movie to Netflix or something like that. Netflix is paying Disney $100 million to do that. They're just putting it on the Disney Plus platform. So you basically just have one division of the company paying the other division of the company. And it's not like there's extra money coming into the company. They're just moving numbers around on the books to make it seem like one movie is more profitable than what it actually is. With all production, marketing, and other expenditures added up in the ledgers, Lucasfilm is still in the red a decade out from the biggest media rights deal in history. We know this due to the nature of British tax laws, as Lucasfilm, a subsidiary of Disney, took advantage of the UK's cushy reimbursement compensation for productions filmed in the country. All their costs and profits were made public. The Force Awakens was a certified hit, however, budgeted at $500 million. It absolutely had to be. Solo is another story. It came as a shock that there could be a calamity on the scale under the Star Wars brand. Disney head Bob Iger hand-waved the misstep as an anomaly when pressed by the New York Times. I think the storytelling capabilities of the company are endless because of the talent we have at the company. And the talent we have at the company is better than it's ever been, in part because of the influx of people from Fox. The article goes on to talk about some of the problems that Lucasfilm has been facing since the acquisition of it. A lot of it has to do with the fact that they're bringing in directors that they have to hold the hand for throughout the whole process. Lord and Miller for Solo: A Star Wars Story weren't doing what the studio wanted, so they fired them and brought in Ron Howard to essentially just redo the whole movie exactly how the studio wanted. So it overinflated the budget to that. Then you have other problems where you have the directors who aren't necessarily talented, but they have to have their hand held by the studio and are just doing what they're told to do. But if the studio isn't providing them the proper supervision, then things suffer. We saw that when it happened with the Marvels. That's a little bit different, but it still kind of applies to a lot of the Lucasfilm properties, or just other things, making movies, kind of doing bait and switch like they did with Indiana Jones. And that really didn't ingratiate itself with audiences too well. So there's a lot of problems with Lucasfilm and Disney in recent years. But that's why I'm hearing these rumors going around that they're talking about bringing George Lucas back, because I can see this being a big thing, because that would definitely, I think, bring back some audiences if George Lucas was behind something that they were producing. I have my doubts that this is actually going to work in the way some people are making it out to be. And I want to point out too, like this article says, it's just rumors right now. We don't have any confirmation that this is actually happening, but the source isn't necessarily a bad source, but let's just go into it. So it says right here, YouTuber Star Wars Theory posted a clip where he was interviewing Roger Christian. Christian worked on Star Wars A New Hope, Star Wars Return of the Jedi, and Star Wars The Phantom Menace. During the clip, Christian just drops that he heard that George Lucas was returning to a galaxy far, far away.
But I think he's coming back. You know, I'm pretty sure now that he's doing a series. I think that they're now bringing him into the fold, from what I hear, because there's a Star Wars live action series coming, and I've got a strong suspicion that George will have something to do with that. That's what I'm thinking is, and I might be prophesying.
Are you pulling my leg?
So that's the rumor going around, and personally, I don't buy it. I think if they're going to do anything, it'll pretty much just be an extension of what they're already doing, which is that they bring him on the set, take a picture of him with the showrunner, and then he gives the show his seal of approval. They might just do that, plus maybe cut him a check so they can use his name as an executive producer, or give him a writing credit or something like that in order to try to lend a little bit more credibility to the upcoming Star Wars show. And I think for the most part, that would help them to an extent, because people would be kind of excited to come back and see like, oh, what's George Lucas doing? He's doing another Star Wars thing. That'd be kind of cool to see what he has in store, but it's not going to be a George Lucas thing. It'll still be very much a Disney Star Wars thing, but this time with George Lucas's name attached to it. And if they did this, it might help boost that show for a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be any lasting improvement on the Star Wars franchise. I think they've pretty much killed it. And if there is any talk about bringing back George Lucas, it just goes to show how desperate they are to try to recapture their audience. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Do you think that George Lucas would actually come back to Star Wars? Or do you think, like I said, like if they do bring him back, it'll just be ceremonial at best? And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And if you can, click the like button and share the video, because it helps out with the channel. Thank you.